I have no problem expressing empathy for struggling white folks, but I do suggest that we must demand reciprocity from them. And what I mean by that is, you know, if white folks who are struggling in Appalachia, in coal country, in the automobile industry, and in the Rust Belt states, if they want us to be sympathetic to their pain, and I get it, and we should be, because some of that pain is quite real, but they must extend the same to black and brown folks who have been in pain a long damn time. And they must acknowledge their similarity with those black and brown folks. It cannot be a one-way street. And so I think if we say, listen, we'll meet you there, and we'll listen to what you have to say, but you got to listen to what these folks have been saying for a very long time, because we have to build that kind of coalition, and we're not going to do that by ignoring people of color who have always been right about this thing, and suddenly pandering to white folks who just learned yesterday that the system is a setup.
If we were white, if we were Irish, if we were Jewish, if we were Poles, if we had, in fact, in your mind, a frame of reference, our heroes would be your heroes too. Nat Turner would be a hero for you instead of a threat. Malcolm X might still be alive. And everyone is very proud of brave little Israel. A state against which I have nothing. I don't want to be misinterpreted. I'm not an anti-Semite. But when the Israelis pick up guns, or the Poles, or the Irish, or any white man in the world says, give me liberty or give me death, the entire white world applauds. When a black man says exactly the same thing, word for word, he is judged a criminal and treated like one, and everything possible is done to make an example of this bad nigger so there won't be any more like him.
Because when Donald Trump gets up and says, Mexico, they're not sending their best. The hell, you think England sent their best? Is black folks in this country know how they got here. And indigenous peoples know how they were here before. And Latinx folks, if they're in touch with the indigeneity of their heritage, also know that their people were here first. It's only European folks who apparently forgot that, as James Baldwin said, our ancestors didn't want to come either. Right? We didn't want to. We had no choice. And if we understand that, it gets harder, doesn't it, to look down on folks. Right? Because you understand what motivates them is the same, but we tell ourselves a lie. We say, we came for freedom, and they're just coming for stuff. The hell? We came for stuff. Land. We came for land. We came for opportunity. We came for a new start. Even if you came for quote unquote freedom, that would still be some stuff, but we didn't come for that. All you got to do is look at the kind of system we set up in the colonies. This is a pretty unfree system. We spent most of our time in the colonies oppressing each other for not being the right kind of Christian and trying to figure out who the witch was so we could kill her. You got to understand your own past if you're going to understand other folks' present, because they're operating on the same motivations that we were. You understand? But this is not just an academic point. I want to suggest to you that it's bigger than that, and it's something that white folks better concern ourselves with, because I think sometimes we very easily, and I understand why, but it's a problem. We very easily and readily assume that the reason we got to change stuff up in this country and fix this problem is to save people of color. Well, here's the thing. Obviously, the impact of white supremacy on people of color is the first and foremost order of business, but it's not white folks' job to save black and brown people. Black and brown folks will liberate themselves from this system, whether we're with them or not. The question that I want white folks to ask is, who's going to liberate us from this system? Because it's doing a number on our mentality. It's doing a number on our humanity, and it's even dangerous for our health. Now, that may seem odd. How can a system that gives you advantages and benefits and opportunities actually be dangerous and bad for your health? Well, think about this. Go back to that point I made a few minutes ago about the notion of meritocracy and individualism, right? If I think, because I've been told, that wherever I end up is all about me, and I actually believe that, and then I find myself struggling, how do I make sense of that? See, when black and brown folks are told, hey, wherever you end up, it's your own fault, right? People of color sort of have enough of a history to know that that's pretty much bullshit, right? People of color have been around the block long enough to know that for the most part, it's always been more complicated than that. So folks of color always at least question that a little bit, if not a lot. But white Americans have been the group that's been able to sort of buy the myth, right? I'm not saying that white folks haven't struggled, but I'm saying that historically, white folks, even working class white folks, were able to say to themselves, listen, if I just play by the rules and I work hard and I keep my head down, and if I have a strong back and I can lift stuff, I'll always have a job, right? Even those white folks in the coal mines who clearly don't have economic privilege. I mean, they're struggling. They're dying at 55 years old from black lung, occupational disease, and injury. So they're not economically privileged, but even they historically, right, were able to look around and at least say to themselves, hey, as long as I do everything right, my kid will be better off than I was. Just like I was better off than my dad. Or they could say, well, you know, my granddaddy worked in the mine, my daddy worked in the mine, I work in the mine, and my son's going to get a job in the mine when he graduates. But even the ability to take that for granted was sort of a privilege, wasn't it? Because folks of color have never been able to just say, oh, I'm sure there'll be jobs for me as long as I'm willing to work, right? Because people of color know that's not the way it's gone down. But if I'm a white person and you've promised me that as my birthright in this country, and then all of a sudden, I don't have a job. Now, if you tell me that's not going to happen to me, and now it does, I got two choices, don't I? I can either start to hate myself, right, and start to think that I'm the problem, that I'm just not good enough, right, that I'm not working good enough, that maybe my work ethic isn't good enough, that maybe I'm not smart enough, that maybe I'm not committed enough, that maybe I can't support my family. But that's hard to swallow, isn't it? It's hard to take that on. So my other option is I got to displace my anger and my anxiety and my frustration onto somebody else, right? So in other words, I'm dealing with all this self-doubt and all this pain. I got to find somebody to put the pain on. And then a politician comes along and that politician says, I can take your pain and I can tell you who's to blame for it, and it's not you. Oh yeah, when those people on that side of town are out of work, it is their fault. But when you're out of work, it's also their fault, right? So you don't have to, that whole myth of meritocracy, that doesn't apply to you. And this stuff works, man. I got an email from a young guy a couple years back, young white guy, and that was his thing. He's like, I can't find a job because blacks and Mexicans are taking all the jobs. For real, all the jobs?
A reporter from WRC-TV was asking questions about Martin Luther King's birthday and the progress blacks have made in society. There, CBS sports commentator Jimmy the Greek Snyder gave his impressions of blacks in coaching in the National Football League. His answers could raise as much controversy as the statements by former Dodgers executive Al Campanis last April on ABC's Nightline news program.
Yeah, pretty soon they're going to have to equalize it for the blacks, for the Greeks, the Jews, and for everybody. I mean, let's make it equal for everybody, you know.
And is it equal? What about in sports?
Well, they've got everything. If they take over coaching like everybody wants them to, there's not going to be anything left for the white people. I mean, all the players are black. I mean, the only thing that the whites control is the coaching jobs. Now, I'm not being derogatory about it, but that's all that's left for them. The black talent is beautiful. It's great. It's out there. But, you know, the only thing left for the whites is a couple coaching jobs.
Yeah, maybe we need to get more black coaches, don't we?
Oh, it's all right with me.
Okay, well,
I'm sure that they'll take over that pretty soon, too.
Are they on Minecraft or some shit, some video game? Like, where are these jobs? Because the data tells me that black folks with a college degree are still almost twice as likely as whites with a degree to be unemployed, no matter what their major, by the way.
Wake up, nigga.
Plus, it's sort of weird, isn't it, when people say, they took my job. Well, did you have the job already? White folks say this all the time, this victimology, whether they're taking the jobs. I get this image in my head of like this white Iowa farmer, right? Wakes up at like 4:30 in the morning to milk the cows, right? Walks out to the barn, time to milk the cows, time to milk the cows, time to milk the cow. Opens up the barn, he's like, well, I'll be damned. These cows have already been milked. Who took my job? And then Andre shoots up from behind the barn and goes, it's me, Andre from Detroit. I took that shit. The hell do we think is happening in this country? That is not a thing. That is not a thing, right? But the thing is, if you have a politician that swears by that, and if you're in enough pain, right, you'll believe anything. You can put the blame on, you say we build a wall down here, everything will be fine. Really? You think that's how capitalism works? You just build a wall and then everybody gets a big raise because the capitalists are like, oh, they figured us out. Think about that, or we don't think about how we got in this political moment. The thing that's so important to understand about Trumpism, not Trump, Trumpism, is that it's really not a new thing. It's really not. Because the whole history of this country is the history of what we just saw happen.
Whatever white people do as far as evil or as far as mistreatment, is just the nature of the white race to be this way.
I know this is part of the Muslim point.
And this is just a fact that the world knows. But I would say that just the nature, from what I see of darker people, is peace. The Japanese seemed to be a peaceful people until somebody else came over. The African was somewhere doing his little dance. These people have never tried to go to other planets or enslave other people or take over countries.
Actually, that isn't true. I don't want to get in an argument with you, but Tahiti, for example, is always used as an example of the paradise that the white man came and destroyed, where people did nothing but pluck breadfruit off the trees and make love and had no disease until the white man got there. Actually had a number of unpleasant aspects to it, like the fact that they strangled infants at birth to keep the population down, that there were live human sacrifices. I know that there have been outrageous injustices against the black people in this country, but it doesn't really get us very far to talk about something as if the white man were some sort of intrinsic devil.
That's the truth. You are right. What you said was the truth. The thing that you all have done to us is worse than the devil you told us about under the ground.
How would you like it if I were to lead into a commercial now?
Whatever you want to say, but when you say
After
devil,
this message
you're right.
from our local stations, we'll return.
See, I gave the Beatles their start. In 1962, I went to Europe.
right.
I took the Beatles on this tour. They was making $50 a week a person. John Leonard would come up and make all these big bills, and I had to pay them. I had the Beatles, I had Jerry and the Pacemakers, and a group called the Swingin' Blue Jeans. I had Mick Jagger and the Rolling Stones. He made his first tour. Nobody never heard of these people.
Do these people send you a Christmas card?
They send me more than Christmas cards. They're my friends. You know, I really I don't want anything from them. All I want them to do is to spread what they got from me. You know, God gave it to me, and they got it from me, so just carry the good word over the world. That's all. I don't want nothing. I just want them to do what's right. Like James Brown, he was my singer in my band. He was with me. Yeah. Joe Tex was my singer. Otis Reddings. Jimi Hendrix was my guitar player for 4 years. But you never hear about all of this from me. You know, everybody say, well, what did he do? I did it all, but then nobody know nothing about it.
I wish I could.
That's where it happened when you're Jewish. They do you like that.
Keep hearing people say, we can't normalize Trump. We can't normalize Trump. Well, there are a lot of things that aren't necessarily normal and typical about Donald Trump and his rhetoric and some of the stuff he does. But there's other things that are excruciatingly normal, right? That have been typical and going on for a really long time, right? Because if you had to sum up the history of this country in one sentence with regard to race and class, you know what that sentence would be? That sentence would be that the history of America is the history of rich white men telling not rich white people that their enemies are black and brown. No, you're not getting these jobs. White boys destroy Wall Street, lose trillions, and the result is what? That they keep getting bonuses. They keep getting bonuses. Nobody's going into the business schools and saying, look, white guys, I know you want to be bankers, but you've proven yourself incapable of the task, and we're giving those jobs to people of color now, or perhaps some women, but of all colors, but definitely not white boys, right? Nobody's doing that. I'm not saying they should. I'm just saying we have a different standard, right? And that's the problem. We got people looking over here at the problem rather than over here where the problem is, because for 400 plus years, we've been told that the enemy was black and brown. That divide and conquer is not new, but it keeps working, and we have to push back against it, because if I don't push back against it and I'm a white person and I internalize all that shame when I'm struggling, my only options are either scapegoat somebody else, which means the problem doesn't get solved. The point is, white folks have been promised this. And if I've been promised this and I'm only getting this, I got to numb the gap between that, because I don't know how to deal with that. See, people that never had any expectations learn how to struggle, right? If you never had any expectations, if you always knew that life was a hustle and you're going to have to grind to get where you got to get, then you don't give up when you run up against that wall. But if you were told that you didn't have to hustle, that all you had to do was work hard and play by the rules which people like you, after all, created, and then you hit that wall, you go crazy. You don't know how to deal with that. Well, you told me my life would be an 8 and it's only a 5.5. Oh, hell no, see? So I got to either take you out or I got to take myself out, which is to say that this privilege of expectations that the dominant group has had is really unhealthy. I mean, it's good as long as it all works out, right? But when the economy changes and it doesn't work out for a lot of people, it becomes a self-destructive thing. That notion that where you end up is all about you, uninterrogated, becomes a dagger pointed at the very heart of the people who created that myth in the first place. Back in April of 2011, there was a cover story in Newsweek. And they were interviewing these white guys who were like managers. These weren't even like working class. These were managers, right? And they'd lost their jobs in the recession. Some of them had been out of work for like a year and they were freaking out and they're walking around looking for jobs. And this one guy's interviewed and he says, every time I'm out looking for a job, I feel like I've got a neon sign around my neck that says, unemployed lazy bum. And I remember thinking to myself, man, who told you that unemployed people were lazy bums? I know who didn't tell you, unemployed people. I'll tell you who else didn't tell you, black folks. I'll tell you who else didn't tell you, people of color generally. You know who told you that unemployed people were lazy bums? You told you. And people like you told you that they were lazy bums. And so the very ideology that you rocked all those years thinking that it would never come back to bite you on the ass has now come back to bite you on the ass, which is to say you'd have been better off to just listen to people of color from day one. Because they could have told you the system was a scam from the time that they were 12. They could have told you that it was a setup. They could have told you that it was a ripoff. They could have told you that it was a hoax, but we didn't want to believe it. And now we're the ones who are the least prepared for change. That's why you see these videos on YouTube, right, of like this white guy in Starbucks that has this meltdown because he got like bad service from a barista who happened to be black. Check this out. Go look for it. Look for white dude Starbucks meltdown. It'll come up. This guy's going just nuts because he got his latte with soy milk or something and I don't know. And he's yelling at her and he starts using racial slurs against this black barista and throws out there, I voted for Trump. What do you think about that? I don't know. Why the hell is that relevant to your order? Right? If he just wanted to say it just to like bust it off on her, and so he's yelling at her, using racial slurs. And then he goes on later, he feels oppressed. Look, here's the thing. If you think bad service at a coffee joint is oppression, you clearly have never experienced oppression, all right? If you think that bad service at the Starbucks is being oppressed, you've just proven white privilege. I don't even have to give my damn talks. I could just come up, show you that clip and be like, that shit right there, that's what I'm talking about, right? But this obliviousness is dangerous, right? Because that dude's having an existential crisis precisely because he's never had to come up against the idea that maybe his life wasn't going to work out quite the way he thought it was. See, James Baldwin had something to say about this too. Baldwin said, he was talking now, this time, first quote was about white folks. This next one's about black and brown folks, specifically African-American folks, but I think it applies to people of color generally in a system of white supremacy like ours. Baldwin said, I don't mean to sentimentalize suffering, but that person who can never suffer can never grow up. Can never learn who they are. That man who has to every day snatch his humanity out of the fires of human cruelty that rage to destroy it, learns something about himself in the process that no school on earth and indeed no church can teach. He gains a sense of his own authority, and that is unshakable. Because in order to save his life, he is constantly having to look at the meaning behind the words, to read between the lines. And he goes on to say, when one is constantly having to survive the worst that life can bring, one eventually ceases to be afraid of the worst that life can bring. And I guess the point I'm trying to make to you is in this era of Trumpism, when folks are sort of popping off and afraid, know this. For the most part, people of color are not afraid because they've seen this movie before. And they are not the ones who were losing their minds at the threat posed by Trumpism. It's those of us who weren't ready. People of color have been trying to tell us for hundreds of years, hold the mirror up to our face and tell us that we have been lying not only to them, but to ourselves. And only now are some of us beginning to believe it. For the love of God, let us start listening to those persons of color. Let us join with them, whether it is in the streets, whether it is in the classroom, or whether it is at the ballot box. Thank you all so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Wake up, nigga. A nigga wake up calls a bitch.